Back in late June, the Supreme Court made a decision to overrule Roe v. Wade, and this decision had us both feeling upset, angry, and scared, and we wanted to take action. The decision is very heartbreaking, especially as college students, and we were both interns in 2020, so we decided to kind of look at the Network for Social Justice for a way to take action.
Yeah, so like Lauren said, Lauren reached out to me shortly after the decision came out. And in that kind of like state of hopelessness I think a lot of us were feeling, or whether it was rage, hopelessness, just like despair, it was really nice to remember that I had the network and I had community to turn to. Community is important for so many reasons. To be able to utilize everyone's various passions and skills and knowledge and work together to kind of come to some sort of solution. But more importantly, it's really important to be there for each other, you know, on an emotional side of things. And that's what the network was for me. I have so many friends that I've met through the network, and to be able to reach out to Bryce and Leora and everyone else who has come our way was just such a privilege. And in that spirit of things, we wanted to kind of have this sort of event where we could both have a very important discussion, have an incredible speaker, but also just like, you know, talk to each other, see each other face to face, and kind of be there for one another. Yeah.
All right, we're going to introduce Jordana.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordana Aishel, and I'm a rising junior at Winchester High School, and this summer I have the privilege of working as a Network for Social Justice intern. Before we get to our main speaker tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about the QR codes over by Lauren and Bujana. These QR codes will lead you to a PDF that'll detail 5 ways to join the fight for reproductive justice after you leave tonight. I'd also like to highlight my 2 favorite steps, which I think are both the easiest to follow and the most important. The first one I'd like to highlight is step number 3, which is educating yourself. This can sound overly simple and even a little insulting, but at a time when mis and disinformation are flying across all corners of the internet, educating yourself using the proper facts is important now more than ever. That's why to this way we've attached a link that gives a comprehensive guide of all the accurate information you need to know about the fight for reproductive justice. The second way I'd like to highlight is way 4, educating others. Educating others can seem scary in a time when discussing controversial topics can cause yelling or even end relationships. However, attached to these ways I've listed is a link to a guide which will list comprehensive and clear answers that to any questions people might have about your views on reproductive justice that should not cause any arguments and should lead to calm and productive conversations. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll consider scanning the QR codes over by Lauren and Bujana. And now I'd like to introduce our wonderful volunteer coordinator, Bryce Mateo.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. We're really excited about our fabulous speaker. Unfortunately, we had 2 speakers, but one got COVID, and she represents the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund. So I have a little note about the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund that I'm going to read on her behalf. So, undoubtedly, this year's Supreme Court decision and resulting abortion bans across the country have launched an unconscionable and unprecedented attack on the fundamental right to bodily autonomy, self-determination, and essential health care. However, even with Roe, abortion access has been limited and financially inaccessible for far too many. Our existence as abortion providers proves this. We all agree that access to abortion shouldn't be determined by your race, your zip code, the size of your bank account, your documentation status, or your gender identity. But access to abortion has been pushed even farther out of reach for many, particularly for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, young people, undocumented people, and those having difficulty making ends meet. The inequities in access to and politicization of abortion demonstrates that we cannot rely on the government to make abortion accessible. Rather, we must collectively work to ensure that those who need access to care receive it. Abortion is legal in Massachusetts, and the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund and 3 other abortion funds in Massachusetts will continue doing what we do best: fund abortions. The Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund works to reduce social and economic barriers to abortion care through movement building, advocacy, education, and direct aid. We believe that access to abortion is a matter of reproductive and racial justice, and a human right. We're working towards our vision of a world where every person has the right to bodily autonomy, where every person has the right to determine their own future. So if you'd like to support the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund, which is our local, in Winchester, our local abortion fund, there are QR codes at both those tables, as well as snacks. So after our wonderful speaker speaks, please feel free to grab some snacks before we have some more conversations. And now I'm really excited to introduce Natasha Henley. She is a passionate advocate for intersectional feminist and racial justice and equality. From a young age, Natasha has always had a spirit of service and support. She has nearly 2 decades of advocating on behalf of marginalized people groups. Natasha is a licensed attorney and is a creator and host of the podcast Women of Color Legal Diaries, which you should all check out. Women of Color Legal Diaries showcases the unheard voices of women of color within the legal profession. Natasha has felt called to create this podcast after realizing that hers and other folks like her were being diminished and marginalized at every level of their careers. She currently serves as the co-president of the Massachusetts Organization for Women, also known as MassNow, an organization with over 50 years of fighting for feminist policy within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You can also find their information, ways to participate, and ways to donate at those QR codes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bryce, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Natasha Henley. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the co-president of MassNow. I know that it is a Wednesday evening and you probably have other things that you would like to do, so it is wonderful to see such a wonderful turnout tonight. I know that this is a hot topic and that many of us care about it, and so it is great to see wonderful faces here this evening. A little bit about me and why reproductive rights are important to me. Reproductive rights are literally everything. That's just the baseline of the situation. But I was raised by young mothers with long lives, and therefore they come from a time when they remember when reproductive rights weren't a choice. And so I grew up listening to their stories about them, listening to the stories about their friends and their relatives and the choices that they didn't have. And I knew then that it would always be something that needed to be protected. And as a black woman, as a queer black woman, knowing that things aren't always something that is guaranteed, knowing the atrocities that have been done in the world to people like me, I knew it was something that would always be something I would have to fight for. And now I really do have to fight for it because it has been taken away. It was something I always knew I needed protected, but now it's something that I have to actively fight for. The freedoms that would be lost if this right were no longer guaranteed was something that always worried me, for people like me and anyone in general. But I know that people like me would face the cost first, and that is something that I could not stand by and watch. So that is something, a little bit about me and why reproductive rights are so important to me and why I'm standing here before you today. As it's already been mentioned, marginalized people groups, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, disabled people, people below the poverty line, those are the people that are going to be impacted by this atrocious miscarriage of justice first. Everybody will be impacted generally, of course. It is something that impacts both sides of the aisle and impacts all genders, but those are the people who will be hit first. So I simply stand for everyone's right to choose, simply, regardless. I do not ask questions, and that is my stance on reproductive justice. A brief overview of MassNow. So MassNow has been around for over 50 years. It's a state chapter of the National Organization for Women, which many of you may be more familiar with. And we've been fighting to pass feminist policy on a local and state level for over 50 years. Over the last 10 years, we've helped lead coalitions to pass legislation to ban the shackling of pregnant inmates. We've passed the most comprehensive pay equity legislation in the country and are leading the Mass Menstrual Equity Coalition for a fight for the IM bill, which is a bill to put menstrual products in all schools, prisons, and shelters in the Commonwealth. The IM bill is our major big priority. It's a bill that we actually helped co-write. We're a grassroots, member-led organization with thousands of members across the Commonwealth, so we're statewide. And our goal is to teach our members how to turn their anger into action and not just be angry, and to advocate for an intersectional feminist agenda. Our membership is a sliding cost, so we definitely recognize the intersectional issue of, joining a membership of any kind cost can be a prohibitive factor. So it is at a sliding scale. People join for $5. People join for $100. It really depends on what people are capable of affording. So we do allow that option for people. For our events, we have things like student activist rates and stuff like that to allow for, and you don't necessarily have to be a student, but that's what we call it. You could just be an activist and be a grown person. But that's just what we label it. To allow for people who are doing good work in their community to be able to afford to come to our events, who may not be able to afford it otherwise because it may be cost prohibitive. We recognize that factor. We do a lot of different events across the community. Some things that we've done, I personally have spoken at 4 rallies this summer regarding the post-Dobbs decision, Dobbs being the case that overturned Roe and Casey. My co-president, Anisha Romney, has been at, I believe, 8 Pride events. So we are also a very LGBT inclusive community. Our board is, I believe the last time I counted, 80% people of color and 30% genderqueer, LGBTQ inclusive, depending on how you define that term. And so we try to be as inclusive as possible across the spectrum of everything. And we have not done a disability consensus because we don't ask that question. So I can't tell you. I myself, though, am disabled and on the board, so I will admit that I'm one. So that is a little bit about Mass Now. Some things that we have done specifically around reproductive rights and our top priorities on this matter. We are a member of Repro Equity Now. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Repro Equity Now, but they are another grassroots organization here in Massachusetts, and they did the Roe Act, and we signed on with them this summer or earlier this year, and we are a member of that coalition. We are a member of many coalitions across the Commonwealth right now who are doing rallies, supporting organizations, fighting for legislative candidates that are opposing candidates that support a federal abortion ban, which is something that is on the horizon. We have nearly 40 bills on our legislative agenda in 5 priority issue areas: reproductive justice, ending gender-based violence, LGBTQI equity, racial justice, economic and constitutional equality. You can read about all of our bills. I won't tell you about all 40 of them because, oh my gosh, I'm an attorney and I don't want to talk about all 40 of them, so I won't tell you about all 40 of them now. But you can, if you would like to, by going to massnow.org/advocacy/priority bills. And under the reproductive justice section, we have specifically the IM bill, which I mentioned about the period products, the Healthy Youth Act, which is about providing a comprehensive and inclusive sex ed in all public schools, that if you teach that sex ed, it needs to be comprehensive and inclusive. It's not a mandate to teach sex ed. It is that if you do teach sex ed in your jurisdiction, it is comprehensive and inclusive. PrEP access for youth is increasing HIV prevention access for young adults, and licensed midwives and out-of-hospital birth access and safety acts is expanding licensing for midwives / doulas, and creating access for certified midwives, adding them to insurance care. It's more complicated. I won't bore you with the details. And more recently, the medication abortion at public universities, which was rolled into an omnibus bill that Governor Baker just signed, some medication abortion into effect in that big protection bill that he signed that carried some traveler protection items and stuff at the end of session last week. I have not read the full bill myself because I've been quite busy, but so I don't have the full update on that for you, but it just was signed over the weekend, and it included several things that we do sign on and agree to. How people in Massachusetts can help. So, first and foremost, you can continue to contact your state rep and state senator. Just bomb their email, go to the state house, Zoom them, annoy them as much as you possibly can about your commitment to reproductive rights, connecting the personal to the political. They really like to hear your personal stories, and that really helps them. Every time I talk to a state rep or a state legislator, they're like, oh, I spoke to this such and such constituent, and they told me this personal story, and oh, it finally connected. And that's how I finally decided to sign on to whatever. And that's always what I hear. So that's first and foremost how you can connect with your state reps and your state senators to get them on board. Secondly, vote and elect progressive candidates who are open about supporting reproductive rights. Check their voting history. Look at what they're saying when they're being asked questions. Look at who supports and endorses them. Make sure that they're open about what they're actually saying in their reproductive rights section and not just, I like women, because that's not enough. Join organizations, and this is a plug for Mass Now, I know, but join organizations like Mass Now because we do support candidates like that. We have a PAC, for example. We have 3 arms of our organization. We have a PAC, a foundation, and an Inc. I will talk about the PAC right now because this is important. The PAC is a political action committee, and the political action committee is responsible for electing intersectional feminist candidates, and we ask a million questions about our reproductive rights. And we are very assertive and very much make sure that we only interview and endorse candidates who are on board and in line with us. So you could join Mass Now. You could become a member of that PAC and influence those decisions. So those are other opportunities that you could do as an individual that would not necessarily cost you too much of your time and effort from your day job to get involved and make a difference locally within your community. You could volunteer with local candidates, find out who they are. They needed a lot of help. They don't get a lot. Local candidates don't get a lot of help. They could use hands on the ground. You can help them. Those are ways that people in Massachusetts can help now. Help this. Thank you.
All right, so you guys will all get a chance to ask any questions that you have, but first we want to go into a community building segment. And as Bijana and Lauren were talking about, one part of this is that you might feel alone, or this kind of feels very isolating. And we want to show everyone that you have neighbors and you have friends, you have other people in the community. So we would love it if you could all turn around and talk to people near you, introduce yourselves, and say why you're here and why this is important to you. And as our speaker just was talking about, reproductive justice is very intersectional, and it's not just about abortion access. There's a lot of other aspects, like sex ed. And so if there's a lot of reasons why this is important to you, and we'd love it if you could talk to your neighbors about why you're here. So we'll do that for like 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have a community discussion where you will be able to share your thoughts, any thoughts around your community, around Winchester, around Massachusetts, around national action. And if you have any questions, we'll do a Q&A period. Okay, thank you so much. Yes.
So to repeat the question, does Mass Now do exclusively Massachusetts legislation or federal legislation as well? Mass Now focuses on Massachusetts legislation. National Now focuses on the federal legislation. We set our own agenda here, but of course we keep an eye on the federal legislation, and we do keep an eye on our federal legislators that we vote on here in those races. So we do keep an eye on that, but we don't lobby the federal legislators. That's up to National Now. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
We were chatting a little bit about how when we sorry, chicken satay in my hand.
Just having a little dinner. Hi. We were just chatting in our group about I've been really looking to get involved in something. Actually, I've been talking to Sasha.
As with everybody.
Yes, everybody talks to Sasha at Mass Now. But I went to a PAC meeting and I loved it. Everybody was great, but it felt a little bit like we were all really excited to solve what didn't feel like super pressing problems. And that it was like, what do we do if every candidate agrees with us? Then can we endorse anybody? And I know that you guys are doing incredible work. And I don't want to diminish that, but I think I'm really eager to move the needle in places that don't agree with me, like Massachusetts generally. And I've also reached out to the EMA fund, and right now they don't know what to do with volunteers because they're not sure about how they can use them legally if people are coming from states with full, denied access to contraceptive care. So I'm just not sure how to get utilized in a way that feels like I'm moving the needle in places that truly need assistance. Because I'm happy to get involved locally, but I really want to feel like I'm helping solve some bigger, truly pressing problems. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or even if it's just to say, no, you're wrong, we're solving big problems here, and that's fine too.
You're not wrong. There, in this state, it is a little bit more difficult because we do have a lot of protections here, and we do have a lot of instances where a lot of our candidates aren't running. They're running against similar candidates, and so you're like, what am I really doing? I understand. I had this conversation with one of my sisters who is moving here from a very red state, so I understand where you're coming from. In terms of the Mass Now PAC, one thing that we implemented this year is that we asked the people who signed on to the PAC to talk to us about races you felt were important to you that you wanted us to get involved in. So people did present to us races where there was an opposing candidate for this particular Democratic race, this Democratic candidate. I can't obviously give you details, right? But there were a couple of races, and we are in phases of reading questionnaires and determining how we're going to move forward with these races. But there are a couple of races where there are strong Republican opposition to a couple of Democratic candidates in this instance. So it's not the large number of cases in Massachusetts, and we had to look for those, and because we have a board and we had people join the PAC who are from other places within the Commonwealth, not central, eastern Mass, just Boston, we were able to find that information. So I would encourage you to try again next year, or even maybe there's no more time to add races for this year, but at another time. I would encourage you to try again to add a race that you may think is significant, that you're like, hey, I know that they're facing hard opposition or even soft opposition, because that's important, okay? So I would definitely encourage you to try again with Mass Now because we have implemented that. I don't know what to say about the EMA because...
It's just, I think it's a problem that a lot of
yeah.
states are having.
Yep.
We're just not sure what to do with all
Precisely. They all got thrown the same bus, and it's sitting on top of them. And so I don't know what to say about any of those organizations. Even as an attorney myself, it's not a law I'm well versed in, and so I'm sorry I don't have an answer for that.
What does EMA stand for, please?
The Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund, and there's more information on these QR codes.
Thank you. I was going to say that. Yes. Um, does that help answer your question?
Yeah. I think personally, I'm just curious, like if there's in your mind and with Mass Now or any other organization, if there's a way to be useful in the immediate kind of danger that some people are finding themselves in or truly in threatened positions. Like, is there anything we can do from here? I know we're not necessarily neighboring states with trigger laws, but what if there's a way to be helpful besides just giving money? Because doing that too.
Right.
If, I don't know if anything comes to mind. I just feel like I've tapped out kind of my green lights.
I know myself personally, and this is not a Mass Now thing, I've considered signing up as like a host person for people who need shelter when they have to come here for abortion access. That's something I've considered doing personally, and I haven't necessarily found an organization that does that. But I reached out to Planned Parenthood because that was my first thought to see, because I am already a victim advocate person for Planned Parenthood, so I reached out to them first. So that is something that I'm personally thinking of doing. That's not something that Mass Now does as an organization. But if you can't find an organization that does something, think about something you may personally be able to do that can help people who are in these positions. Mm-hmm.
Yes, in the back.
Sorry.
How can our local action make a national impact?
That's a very good question. The louder the local impact, the bigger it makes on a national stage. That's basically how that works, unfortunately. Inviting your legislators, inviting your mayors, inviting your local news people, the big 5 channel news people to put it on the news, that'll help make it national. Inviting the senators to show up at things. Ed Markey shows up at like literally everything. So inviting them to show up at things. I'm not entirely sure your congresswoman here,
Catherine Clark.
not entirely sure what her record is for appearances, but invite her to things that might help as well. Like inviting people of notoriety, inviting as many individuals, like when they see like a congress of individuals in your local neighborhood, and they're like, oh, they get really impressed by that they're able to see people en masse congregating and doing things for an initiative that may or may not pass in their favor, just the fact that they care about it. Like in Brooklyn, when all those people shut down the train system that day when it leaked. So, yeah.
I'm going to try to thread the needle a little bit between the question over here of like what can we do and local action to impact either national or like other states. So I was aware of a postcard writing campaign for the recent Kansas decision. So I think people in Massachusetts were writing postcards to people in Kansas who were going to vote or make a decision. So is that something that you think, I was not even sure if that, was sort of allowed in the sense that it's not Massachusetts people writing to legislators of other states, but it's like voters in other states or, citizens, residents of other states to try to encourage them to take action and know that they were supported from a distance, if you will. So I just wondered if you could comment on things like that. Both, is that helpful? Is that, yeah.
I don't know of any recorded metrics to say that it's technically helpful, but I do think that knowing that there's somebody out there who supports you, especially if you're in a red state or in any system that is in opposition to you and you happen to believe differently, knowing that there's someone anywhere who agrees with you, I think is a supportive mechanism, could help you make that push to make that vote that you may not have made otherwise. That postcard could be very timely for that person to help them make that correct decision. So I would say yes, write that postcard anyway. It can't hurt. Is it wrong? Is it illegal? Is it incorrect? It's not illegal yet. And it's not wrong. So I would say go for it. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to add on. So in the infamous QR code that we've been talking about, I compiled a list of, like we said, like events that you can attend both virtually and in person, and part of that is kind of relevant to what we've just been talking about. So there are links to, for example, volunteering with a Planned Parenthood in your area, which, you know, could very well be hosting people from those threatened states. And as well as that, there are postcard writing campaigns on there, and phone banking for other states. And it's not just, you know, national, it's also global. It could be really interesting to learn about what this looks like on a global scale as well. So yeah, there's a ton of events in this QR code that are very relevant to what we were just talking about towards taking action. So just wanted to promo that one more time.
Global, that's awesome.
I think many of you may know me, Vince Dixon. I was on the Finance Committee for 4 years, and I know some of the political landscape. Rep Day is our state rep. He has a nominal right-of-center independent running against him. Catherine Clark is the assistant speaker, fourth in the leadership nationally. She has a right-wing fascist we all know of, Caroline Colarusso, running against her. And there may be some other activities around. We should be very clear and understand, and from my own experience I know, the Republican Party no longer allows, frankly, people who are moderate or progressive. The two candidates running for governor are right of center. As I like to say, deal is no deal. But Doty, who's running, pretends to be like a Baker or Weld and is not. Look at his social positions. They are right of center as well. The Republican Party in Massachusetts is run by a Trump organization. They damaged this town in the town election in the spring with their committee, and we have to be alert. Though we have a majority here, we need to do the work. So contact your legislators and their campaigns if you want to do something that is something to do. We've got to do the work and keep doing the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts in the crowd? Oh, thank you.
Hiya. I was just curious if women that come to Massachusetts from a state that doesn't allow abortion, if they're like protected by Massachusetts legislation, or like, for example, maybe their coworker noticed they were pregnant, they came back to the state and then they reported them, would they still get in trouble even if they didn't do it this state?
They're protected now. Here for that abortion. However, there is problematic issues if they go back to their state. They can get that abortion here under our healthcare system. They will get the same protections as a Massachusetts resident. We will not report them. We would not extradite them back to their state. But if they electively went back to wherever their state is, that bans abortion. We don't have any control over what happens to them. We no longer have any jurisdiction over that person. And if that coworker in this example did report them, and there were consequences based on that state's law, whatever happened to that person could be dire, and there would be nothing we could do about it. Yeah.
I have a question. It's a little more broad than I think what you've been talking about.
Use the mic. I'm wondering about the role of stories in this. You brought it up earlier, you've sort of woven it in again, and as a small nonprofit that's doing a lot of work in and around this space, I'm curious if you could maybe speak more to it. I think a lot of us have these stories, have heard these stories, and we don't know what they mean in an activist space or how they can be used effectively to mobilize people.
You mean like personal stories, right? So there's this concept called proximity. And proximity is when you have, like, Bryce and I are in proximity to one another right now. We're next to each other, we're near one another. But say, for example, Bryce has never been in proximity to a black woman in her life. She may have never experienced any kind of thing that I have experienced or looked or visioned or anything. That is going to change her perception as to how she experiences the world. So telling stories, because to a person who can't actually literally experience carrying a fetus because they don't have a womb, telling stories helps put that person in proximity to the experience. Telling stories about dangerous abortion experiences puts them in proximity to a person who's had a dangerous experience and how they could have lost their life, or why they chose to go that route instead of carrying through with the pregnancy, because it makes it more personal to the person who couldn't fathom it before because they are not capable of experiencing it themselves. And so that's why telling stories are so powerful. When you read a book, it puts you in the mindset of the author. If you're reading their biography, if you're reading a fiction, they're putting you in their world. They're taking you to a travel of a whole other place, and you can experience exactly what they're telling you. It's a very similar concept when you tell these stories, whether it's a good story or a bad story. And so that's why Mass Now is very honed in on making the personal political, and we really encourage people to tell your various legislators stories about yourself or somebody close to you or something that you may have picked up, or why you care about reproductive rights, whether it's from sex ed to abortion, because it makes the personal more relevant to them, especially since the majority of legislators are not womb carriers. So it's harder for them to fathom the concept. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to put in a plug for Mass Now also, and the network getting involved. Speaking of local activism, it is so critical because a lot of times we get too complacent and comfortable with the people we have leading our state. For example, in several of the statewide races, there are multiple candidates like Attorney General that are very different from their life experiences. And so if we're not paying attention, things can change with us without our active participation. One of the things that Mass Now has been trying to work on and local school districts need to enforce is the Healthy Youth Act that we still haven't gotten through, and it provides very clear, comprehensive, medically accurate information to all students, not just binary male-female. And so we really need to get our legislature to pass that act and to fund it so that school districts have an incentive to teach this kind of a curriculum for sex ed. So do stay involved, do get involved in the Mass Now. I was on their PAC, it is amazing, it's so much fun. So that's a plug for them.
We did not pay for that plug.
Do we have any last thoughts or questions? All right, so I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to personally thank you all, and I would love to thank the Network for Social Justice. This is my 4th year working with them, and now I'm the summer intern coordinator, and had a lot of fun and been able to do a lot of amazing things. And what makes that happen is your donations and Leora. So, and the many other volunteers. And of course, thank you to Bujana and Lauren for coming up with this and helping organize this. And there are many other volunteers who helped. So thank you to everyone, and a huge thank you to Mass Now and Natasha. They're an amazing local organization, and it'd be amazing they would love volunteers and they would love donations. So please, before you leave, I would love it if you guys wanted to talk more, get to know everyone. We would love to talk to you. We're going to be hanging out behind these tables. Please come to these tables. There's snacks, there's waters. and there's very important QR codes. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.